wanted to thank you, Joe, once again for coming on here and talking to everybody. If you don't mind giving everybody sort of like a breakdown on who you are and your
Sure.
experience and
Sure.
the value you're bringing to this.
Okay. Super
More than
cool.
just yeah.
Yeah, Chris, good to see you again. My name is Joe DiGioia. Couple things, prior to where I am now, here in Longmont, Colorado, I spent 3 years in Austin, Texas, working for IBM. At first, I worked for the marketing communications team as a design manager, and then I moved over to the a design thinking group, where I managed content creators. And I only did that one. I only had that job for a couple months before I decided that I needed to kind of move on from just like corporate America. Prior to that, I spent 15 years at Savannah College of Art and Design as a design educator. I spent, partially part of my time teaching undergraduates, and then the other part teaching graduates. And then prior to that, I spent a whole bunch of years working as art director, creative director, senior designer, in and around the New York, Connecticut area.
Nice. Yeah. And so everybody knows that's how Joe and I met is I was one of his students and he was a fantastic mentor and everybody always looked up to you as
Oh,
students.
thank you.
So yeah, for sure. We still talk about it to this day. So yeah, and I remember our portfolio class was the last class that you were teaching at SCAD. So I'm glad that I had an opportunity to be with you.
So 2019, June,
Yeah,
or May 2019, yeah?
yeah, 2019, and you're moving on to
Yeah,
IBM from there.
there
So
you go.
yeah, and it was a combination. We had it was a split class of graduate students and undergrad, so it was pretty interesting.
Yeah, yeah.
Um, I feel like we got spoiled in a way as like undergrad students because we also had to, or we got to see like what the graduate students were producing and kind of maybe hold ourselves to a higher standard in ways, you
That's
know?
good. Yeah, yeah. I didn't
Yeah.
remember that. I don't remember that part of it, but now that you mention it, it comes back to me. When I don't know, I just was I just got a copy of a book that I'm featured prominently in. I didn't even remember being part of this uh, PhD analysis by this fellow by the name of Keith Sawyer. And he wrote me like months ago and he says, "Hey, like I got a copy of this book for you. I'm sending it to you." And if you remember, I spent like all these hours like in your class at SCAD in 2010. And I was like, dude, that was like a lifetime ago.
That's crazy. Did he just
Yeah.
put the book out?
Yeah. So it's
Wow.
called I got it right here because I just got it like the other day. It's
Yeah.
called Learning to See.
Mhm.
And it's called Learning to See Inside the World's Leading Art and Design Schools by Keith Sawyer, Sawyer. And yeah, man, there's photos and all sort of me in there. I was like, whoa,
That's
like
crazy.
yeah, there's me in Penner Hall. Like, wow, that's way back in the day. So
Oh,
there's another like, little, like, oh yeah, I'm actually published. I didn't write the book, but I'm featured pretty prominently in there.
that's pretty awesome. I bet you
Yeah.
got kind of nostalgic for SCAD though, a little
Yeah,
bit.
yeah. I mean, like, since I've even when I was working at IBM, I loved working at IBM. I loved my teammates there. I loved the whole, the way that IBM worked, etc. Um, but yeah, there were, like, I can't tell you how often, I missed my time at SCAD. I mean, it was just, in my mind, it was just time for me to like move and try something new. And so, we're going to talk about like job searching. Like, I went through a job search at that particular time. Um, and it came about just through like networking.
Yeah.
And then, someone that I knew at IBM who was a SCAD alum kind of turned me on to some things, like their job portal. And then I reached out to some people that I knew that worked there. And they turned me on to my eventual manager, who then I met while I was like, when I finished my nightly portion of working at SCAD that afternoon. We had like an hour-long conversation in my office at SCAD, which is kind of creepy, like, oh, I'm already working and I'm like
Yeah,
in
right.
in my office, like talking to this one from IBM. And then that was just kind of like an introductory, like talk, if you will. Like we didn't talk about the job, we didn't talk about, anything in particular, but we just like talked about like, you know, what I did at SCAD, what were my design kind of like mantras and philosophies. Um, and then, she said, "Hey, like I really like what I'm hearing. Can we do something a little bit more formal in like a week?" And I was like, "Okay." And then, then it went from there, and then it went to like a whole um, you know, like proper interview with the HR people. Then there was the back and forth with some, emails and this, that, and the other, and salary and back and forth. And then before you know it, like, they offered me the job, and we were just starting like that spring quarter, and I had to make a decision like in like a millisecond,
Yeah.
because I couldn't, like my contract was coming up at SCAD. I needed to either sign it or decline it, or, accept this job or not accept this job. I mean, it was a pretty stressful like week.
Sure.
But once I did that, it was like, okay, whew, okay, done, sealed, signed, delivered, and I have a new job. Now I can decline this contract from SCAD, and when I can kind of move on to my next thing. And it was really like exciting and, anxiety ridden. And, I hadn't had a new job in 15 years. So like to take on something completely new and a different, part of the country that I never lived in before was, kind of scary.
Yeah. Do you think you acclimated okay coming from like that long as a professor into like a corporate environment?
Yeah, I think that, one of the things that I prided myself in, and as a design educator, was um, I never made it like about academics. Like I wasn't an academic per se. I was a design professional, and that's what I think, SCAD liked about me. And I think that one of the things that IBM liked about me was that I was an educator and slash manager of people.
Yeah.
And I knew how to direct. I knew how to direct like large numbers of people, whether it had been from my past experiences or my experience as a design educator. And, you know, everybody on my team at IBM was, a lot younger than me. And we had, junior to, mid-level designers to like senior level designers. And so, having to manage and work with and had been all those people at one point in time, I think was something that was enticing to them. They also like the fact that, one of my, ways of educating and thinking about design was through a design thinking lens. And that's a big thing at IBM. Maybe not in the marketing department, even though like I really tried to like switch some things around there. But in the kind of product development area, that was like, that's a big thing. They have their own kind of workbook and work throughs, if you will, for design projects on the product side. They have their own website that's dedicated to that. They have their own like methodology of design thinking, which I thought was really interesting. So all those things I was already been teaching and put in my teaching aspects and practice since like 2009. So, it's not something that I just picked up. This is way before IBM in a lot of ways even started thinking about this. So, you know, I think they liked a lot of the different things. And the fact that, I can be, you know, pretty academic in a lot of ways as well, rather than just be a straight professional, someone that come from, let's say, Meta or from Google and kind of moved into IBM. There's like, yeah, this guy's going to bring a completely different perspective. Like there's the history aspect that he's really interested in, or there's a making aspect that he's really interested in, and then there's a theoretical aspect, and then there's design thinking. So all those things I think really helped me out a lot.
Yeah, it seems like it was actually a pretty natural transition for you then.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
So I want to kind of like go back a little bit because you were
Sure.
talking about how you established like a genuine connection with the person before you even actually went through the process of like an actual job interview.
Yes.
So that's something that I miss about being in school, of course, is, like the career resources and being able to get like face-to-face time with people
Sure.
because, the markets are super saturated. I think it's fair to say it's oversaturated right now,
Hmm.
so I don't know what the process looks like completely. I have ideas on what it looks like, but
Yeah.
you
Yeah.
don't get that face to face. You don't get to have the connections with people, which was really important, at least for me with my journey as far as potential employers and stuff like that. You know,
Right.
yeah, it'd be nice if there was a way for us to sort of shift back towards that, or like more resources. I don't know, career fairs or something like that. And I'm sure they exist, but
Yeah.
um,
Yeah.
yeah, I don't know. I thought that was a good point.
I think that, one of the things that might be interesting in that regard is to seek out like like-minded organizations, or and this is something that I, participated in a lot, even when I was working at IBM, but even more so when I was working at SCAD, and prior to that was like conferences. The idea of like going to a design conference. I get emails about those all the time still. There's a brand new conference that I think either is happening or just happened, or there's AIGA. I think there's one coming up for Type Directors Club or what have you. I think anybody that's job searching, and I know this is kind of difficult because obviously there's a financial component to it,
Yeah,
but ultimately, I find that though that financial outlay in a sense is an investment in yourself, whether you land a job from that, or you just kind of learn some new and different ways of thinking. You get to see like what everybody that's working, today or tomorrow or the next day are doing, and how their, process is, what they're learning, or what they need to know, or what their problems are, and things of that nature. Like, I learned so much by going to these conferences on the regular, and
sure.
again, whether it was an academic conference, when I was at SCAD particularly, or I used to go to a lot of the AIGA like annual conferences, because like I felt that it was important for me to remain relevant as to what designers are doing
Yeah,
currently. And so
yeah,
this way I can pass on that knowledge to yourself and other design students, and not just say like, back in my day, like this is what we did, like,
yeah, right.
there's still a lot of people that do stupid shit like that, excuse my
Yeah,
French, is that, like I worked with a lot of people at SCAD. They'd be like, like I did this back in the day. Like, that was 30 years ago. Like, like the world is completely different,
yeah,
you
right.
know? Like
Yeah,
you can't talk about like what you did. Like certainly I can talk about a couple things that I did, and I obviously would always bring that up because, when I found that it was relevant, but I tried to keep myself very current.
yeah,
And I thought that that was really important because, go like I went, every summer I would go to New York and, meet up with former alum or former, friends of mine that were continuing to work. And while those conversations were more like personal per se, but they were also like, fact finding,
yeah,
like, hey, what are you working on? Like, what sort of problems you having? Or, what new programs are you working on? Or, what, processes is your studio like putting into practice that are making your job more efficient, or maybe timekeeping more efficient, or anything that just kind of like
yeah,
was filling me with information that I can pass on to my students going forward, So I did
yeah,
that like every summer,
yeah,
I never just like stayed in Savannah and like, oh, like I'll just like read about it. Like you can't do that, man. You got to meet the people that are doing it like every day. Like it's a grind, like again, I was a practicing designer for over 30 years. Like it's a grind, man. And it's hard, to be a designer every day. It's hard to like, you know, remain relevant. It's very difficult if you want to switch jobs. Like, job searching is very difficult. It was difficult then, it's difficult now. Like, that's why we're here talking about it.
yeah.
It's never gotten easier, you know?
Yeah, totally. Yeah, that's a great idea. yeah, go I mean, in terms of like staying on top of everything, because like we were saying off camera too, is like it's evolved so much even in the past 5 years, and every single
Yes.
year it changes, right? So
Yes.
I do have a question as far like what do you think about create like a as a graphic designer, right? And I guess
Mm-hmm.
it could cross over to other people as well, other fields, but like is it important to stick or stay, I don't want to say stay true to yourself, but in terms of aesthetic, right?
Mm-hmm.
Creating projects and organizing your portfolio to have a style of your own, or sort of lean more towards like trendy aesthetics when it comes
Yeah. Yeah.
to, I guess, marketing yourself and being more attractive to employers. And then also on top of that, I know this is sort of like a loaded question, but
Mm.
do you think it's taboo to include that you are savvy with AI resources and also things like Canva
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
as a design?
So let's start with the first question, and we'll go into the AI question. I always thought that it was important to one, stay true to yourself. Whatever you felt that where your strengths were, what your ideology was, to kind of showcase that, because that's in a sense like what you're selling.
Yeah,
Um, the idea you're going to try to sell something that you don't necessarily believe in, but you think is going to get you the job. And once you get into the job, what are you going to do, man? You're going to be like, well, shit, man, I don't know how to do this. Like, I don't
yeah,
feel good about this. Like, no, you want to find something that fits like what you believe in. And I think it's really important to like go down with the ship and like do what you believe in,
okay,
And so if you want to do, I don't know, like sports, then do a lot of sports stuff, show a lot of sports stuff, and seek out Adidas and Nike and Puma and all these other brands that do sports. Like, otherwise it doesn't make a lot of sense to me. Um, Again, I always thought that it was helpful to be well-rounded because, again, then you can fit a lot of different niches. The
yeah,
idea that you're like a one-trick pony, kind of limits your job search. But
sure.
if that's what you believe in, if that's the aesthetic that you believe in, if this is the philosophies that you believe in, then go ahead and sell those. But you got to really do a lot of groundwork to find those people that are gonna mesh with you, and you're gonna mesh with them, right?
Yeah, yeah, and you're forced to like take on more work yourself, right? Because I think that also goes into the question of whether or not you should tailor your resume for each job description, right? So if
Yeah.
you are leaning towards a specific niche, then you don't have to do that, right?
Yep.
Whereas like if you're trying to be well-rounded and just kind of just looking for a corporate gig, if that's what you're looking for, then
Yep.
like I don't know. What do you think about that as far as I know we'll get to the AI stuff as well, but what
Yep.
do you
Yep.
think about the idea of tailoring resumes for each job description?
Well, and I think that again, your resume is a reflection of like who you are and what you've done. So the idea you're going to, let's say, massage it for each and every job certainly makes sense, but like what are you going to change? Like you could only, let's say, you can't make up jobs that you've done, like either you've done the work or you haven't done the work.
Yeah,
Or you have this particular skills, or you don't have these particular skills. I think like the resume is just like, to me, it just gives me an idea. Like again, I never based anything on solely on a resume. I never based anything solely on a portfolio. I never based anything solely, on an interview. Like again, I interviewed like hundreds of people at IBM in my
yeah,
short amount of time I was there. We were always like every like once a week we were interviewing and reviewing portfolios. We got hundreds of these things, man.
yeah.
And we had a spreadsheet. You have to go through and like check off all the people that you reviewed and then put in either like, yes, no, or maybe, or something like that.
Okay,
I mean, there was like so many people that we had on this list to go through, and you had to like look at their resume, you had to look at their portfolio, and then based on that, just give an idea to our manager to like, okay, here are the people that we think we want to interview, and then we'd interview 4 or 5 people, in a month's time, just to
Wow.
kind of like put them on, you know, like a list of like, okay, now if we need to fill a position, we already have these 5 people kind of like lined up to go. And
Nice.
then when there was like a job opening, then we kind of knew like, okay, we're going to go to these 5 people. We're going to pick two of those people to start, 1, 2, 3, and then go and hire one of those people. And then now the rest of the 4 people are kind of gone.
Yeah.
Um, but again, it's very difficult to, you know, uh, choose a candidate from a resume, solely from a resume or solely from a portfolio. Because again, I've seen people and I've listened to people like pretty much lie
Yeah.
from everything,
Yeah.
like I've seen people like show a portfolio, and then you ask them about the work, and then you ask them about like what their ideas were, again, where's your process on that? Can you show me some sketches, blah blah, and then they got nothing. And then I'm like, eh,
Yeah.
rejection.
Yeah.
And again, we'd get back together as a group of people and talk about like, the candidates, and we're like, I'd be like, nope, we are not
Yeah.
gonna. That person was totally BSing, you
Yeah.
know.
Which
Um,
to your point, like it kind of surprises me because like at a certain point, you're going to have to talk about that stuff. Like, what do you
yep,
think is going to happen?
yep. And again, having worked at SCAD, I know that that's not something that I would ever advocate. You know what I mean? And so I know that my students, whatever, would not be doing that. So your top tier, like universities, colleges and universities, are not going to be showcasing that type of work, not going to be talking about their work in that particular way, or not going to be trying to BS their way through it. There might be like 1 or 2 in there, but for the most part, you're going to get like solid folks. But I'd also say that like I saw some of the people that I hired came from, like schools that weren't necessarily like on your top tier design school list.
Yeah.
Like I hired quite a few people from Texas State. And while, they have a decent program, they didn't have nearly the program that I would say we had at SCAD, you
Sure.
know?
Yeah.
So again, I would never say like, oh, this person went here, so they're going to be amazing. Like, you know, if you think about all the people that we had in your class, right? That there was like 10% of those people were like amazing. And most likely, I would hire them, you would hire them, a lot of other people would hire them. There were another 10% people that were in that class that probably didn't even deserve to be in that class, but
Yeah.
ultimately somehow got through and were in a portfolio class. And then, 80% of the people were kind of living in the middle that were, really good designers and had a lot of good potential to, make a name for themselves.
Yeah.
Um, so, I mean, I think that that's just something that, I saw on the regular of all the people that we got to see at IBM. And even in the portfolio reviews that I just did up at, CSU, I just did a portfolio review a month and a half ago at Colorado State. Now, again, not a really big program, not really known for their graphic design. Um, and I can tell, like, there were a lot of holes in those portfolios. But there were a couple of students that I was like, okay, like I could see this young lady, you know, she has potential. She seems really bright. She seems eager. So again, it's about like, to me, it was always about, ultimately when it came down to, was like a feeling. Like I feel
Yeah.
that this person could work with me and my team.
Yeah. Yeah. That's, it's interesting that you say, what's it called? Well, to your point about the way SCAD operates versus like other colleges and stuff, it was interesting hearing after graduation because I met, I'd work with people from other colleges, state colleges, and things like that. And, what we would do in like 2 weeks' time for a project is what they would do over like a span of 4 months or
Yeah,
something like
yeah,
that,
yeah,
And I like, thought it was normal, kind of. I mean, I was conditioned to thinking what we were doing. I knew it was intense. There were moments
Yeah,
that were pretty
yeah, yeah,
intense, but
yeah, yeah.
it was going to work in our favor if that's what you were looking for, if
Right,
you're
right.
disciplined and all that. But
Right. I mean, the quarter system in and of itself is like a really difficult system to work in.
yeah.
When I went to graduate school at RIT, like that's the system we were on. So when I
Mhm.
transitioned to working at SCAD after going back to work, but then also working at SCAD, like I had gone through that as a student, as a graduate student. And so I kind of knew like what it was going to be like as an educator, being on the
Yeah,
other side of the desk.
sure. Do you see value in pursuing, say, right now somebody can't get a job, right? They're having a very difficult getting a job and they have an undergraduate degree, but not a graduate degree. Do you see
Yeah.
value in spending the money on going to grad school right now?
Yeah. Um, I always see value in that. My perspective was always that it's best to, you know, have some distance between your undergraduate degree and your graduate degree.
Yeah,
Now, there were many students that I had as graduates that went from undergraduate to graduate.
yeah,
There was a reason for that. There was a financial reason for that. There was, like a loan reason for that. There was all sorts of reasons for that. I always told them, like, if I had, let's say, um, I may have had, maybe 4 or 5 students in my time at SCAD who were seniors and say, Professor, like, I want to go to graduate school. I'm just going to go from undergrad to grad. I would always tell them, no, I don't think that's a good idea. Here's my thinking about that. Go to work for a little while, start working in a couple of different areas. Let's say you're working in branding, you're working in, corporate communications, you're working in product, but whatever it might be. And then you're like, okay, I really love product design. I love the process of product design. I love the outcomes. I like the way I need to be an empathetic thinker, et cetera, et cetera. Okay, cool. Now I have a direction for me to choose a graduate program that kind of fits like the way that I want to think and I want to improve on, like as an
yeah,
undergraduate, like there's so much like just basic learning that you're doing,
yeah,
and then you're just trying to improve upon that. So ultimately, your kind of ultimate job in undergraduate school is to put a portfolio together so that you can go out into the world and be a productive graphic designer, period, in my mind. Um, and so, but as a graduate, you're not trying to learn how to be a graphic designer. You should have already done that in undergraduate school.
yeah,
And so graduate is to like explore maybe like a singular idea, because ultimately your outcome in graduate is supposed to be to contribute to the discipline of product design, graphic design, whatever direction you go. That
sure.
you're not, it's not to be like to become a better designer. No, it's to like add to the discourse of graphic design, of the discipline, period. Like because you write a thesis, you
Yeah,
then build a project around that, and then you put that out into the design ether to like for other people to do more research on or to
yeah,
use as research, you see. So I think that's people don't sell it correctly and don't understand it correctly. And when a lot of students would come to SCAD and are like, hey, I just want to, I didn't have a really good undergraduate experience, so I don't even know like how to use type or whatever. I'm like, yeah, I can tell. you know like you should
yeah,
already know how to do that. Like I have undergraduates here that are much better like designers than you are, you
yeah,
know
yeah,
but they might be more mature, they might be more advanced in their just general thinking and their you
sure.
know their their general like educational knowledge, but you know they're not better designers than a lot of my I had I always had undergrads that were so much better than a lot of my grads.
Yeah. Um,
So I always see value in it. So again,
yeah,
yourself, you've already been out since 2019. So like I
yeah,
said, if you were to say, or any of your classmates were to turn around and say, "Hey, I'm thinking of going to graduate school," I said, "Okay, it sounds cool. Like you've been out for a while, but like really be thoughtful about if you or yourself or anybody else talking about that. I think it's really helpful to kind of think about what program do you want to target? It's almost like a job search again.
Yeah.
Like what program do you want to target so that you can advance this like train of thought?
Yeah. Yeah, that makes sense. Me personally, since we're on this topic,
Yeah, yep.
I've always thought about teaching at some point
Mm-hmm.
in my life.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but it does require a graduate degree, you
It
know?
does.
So my biggest fear is taking on more student debt because I'm already so far in the hole, you
I'm
know?
with you. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
But you know, and I understand like you're investing in yourself depending on where you
Agreed.
go and everything, and people
Yes.
make choices on where they go. But I've met awesome people, and for me, it's also about like that's the price I paid for the experience and the connections I've made and everything, right?
Yes.
But yeah, I don't know. I guess like, do you have advice on how to maybe better position myself, or is it just kind of one of those things where it is what it is? Like if that's what you want to go for, then you know, once again, you're just investing in like your future.
Yeah, I think it's twofold. It's like one, you know, just like looking for a job, you need to like put your best foot forward. But again, you need to be very thoughtful in this approach for, graduate application.
Sure.
And you really need to take your prior experience and both as an in at SCAD and then in the job market and say, you know, this class is one of the reasons why, this project is one of the reasons why, this whatever it might be, um, is the reason why I chose to apply to, again, in my case, Rochester Institute of Technology, because I feel that, from what I've seen from your graduates, et cetera, and from your faculty, I can, you know, really explore X. Like
Yeah.
at some institutes, they actually even ask you for like a thesis proposal. Like, what are you coming here for?
Sure.
Like why do you, and that's how they're going to then judge whether that you're a good candidate for that particular school, because that you will be able to then tell them you've looked at their faculty and say like, this person and this person really their academic research and their direction and their thoughts and ideas are based around these theories. Okay, super cool. Like they really want to know about, like, they dive like deep into like typographic hierarchy. Okay, super cool. Like that's their thing. All
Yeah.
right. Or information design, that's their thing. I'm just telling you about like some of the experience that I had
Yeah.
at RIT, or in design history, American design history. That those are the people for the most part that I worked with on, when I went to RIT. That's what they did. Okay,
Yeah.
so that allowed me to, if I wanted to do something that was, historically, minded, then I would choose Roger as, like, say, my thesis advisor. Or if I want to do something about information design, I would have picked Deborah. If I wanted to pick something about typography or maybe history and typography, that's where I went. Then I picked Bruce and Roger as my. So I already like knew once I got there, like this is how I'm going to like fashion my experience here at RIT.
Yeah. That's really interesting. I haven't looked at it from that perspective, but it totally makes sense that like each person, I mean, the faculty is a team, right? So you
Yes,
all have to have
sure,
like a strength that you bring to create a collective, like I don't know, expert group of graphic designers, right? That's who you all
exactly.
come from.
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh yeah. I mean, it's such like a simple concept, but I don't know why it hasn't like crossed my mind. So that's definitely something good to know.
Yeah, I mean
Um,
that's what, like people put into, let's say, the hiring of a staff of faculty. Like they're looking at each person, and not everybody is the same. You know
yeah.
what I mean? Not
Yeah.
everybody's done their thesis on X. You know what I mean? They've done, like, someone's done it on this, someone's done it on that, someone's done that. So therefore, when you put all those people together, then you can see how your student body then from your faculty gets a well-rounded view of design, you know?
Yeah. Yeah. Looking back at it now, I see with the professors that I had and everything.
Right.
Um,
They're not all speaking the same language,
no.
and well, I mean, they are, like, but they all have their own like little twist on things, and so therefore they bring their experiences to the classroom so that you can become a more well-rounded and you get your own view on it. You can say, well, I like what Joe said, I like what Bob said, I like what Marianne said, I like what this person said. Okay, super cool. Now I put all that together and you can form, Chris's view on design.
Yeah.
Now that you have your own view on design, now you got to say, okay, now I got to go out. If I want to, work, I got to find the people that are like, that can utilize that sort of thinking, and
Sure.
they're maybe like missing that in their, branding outcomes or in their, product outcomes or what have you. And
Yeah.
that's how you got to sell yourself to a graduate program or to, a potential employer. Like, hey, I recently saw, like, a project that you did for, I don't know, XYZ, for MIT Press, just looking at that book.
Yeah.
Okay. Um, you know, I feel that my strength in X could, elevate the outcomes that you guys there at MIT Press are doing, because of the simple fact that I see the world through this lens, and here's the work that emulates that this particular way of thinking.
Yeah. So you would think it's worth it, just reach out to the employer, even if you don't see a position open up, and advocate for yourself as far as
Absolutely.
that goes?
Yeah, yeah. And so, it kind of goes, now we're back to the idea of like job searching. So yes, there's nothing in the world that says that you have to wait. Anybody is searching for a job, like look at places that you want to work, and it doesn't matter if they don't have a job opening.
Yeah.
Because if they think that what you do and the way you present yourself and the way that you talk via your email and through your resume and through your work is something that they want to then show to their creative people and be like, hey, like, I don't know if we have anything open right now, but like this guy, Chris, really got it together. And I really like what he has to say. He's very thoughtful. He took his time to look at what we do and how he might be able to impact our our final outcomes.
For
And
sure.
ultimately that's what they want to do. They want to improve on the work they do. So if you can, in a nice way, you don't want to be like, hey man, your work sucks, and man, if you hired me, like, this is going to be awesome. No, I don't want to hear that, because you're not all that,
Right.
and we're not that bad.
Yeah.
But if you did it in a thoughtful way that said like, hey, um if you look at this project that I did, which kind of mirrors what you guys were doing in this product space, you can see that my particular my design thinking process would potentially enhance this particular outcome.
Yeah. Yeah. And reinforce the fact that you both share the same values.
Yep,
Um,
exactly.
cool, cool.
And
Um,
hey, I searched your site. I realized that at this particular time you don't have an opening, but should anything come up, please be in touch. And God forbid, like, they reply to you, then you got them, because now
yeah.
you have somebody's name. And okay, so she's like, say person from HR, it's a woman in this case, replies back to you and says, hey, Chris, thanks for reaching out, but we don't have anything and we're on a budget, blah, blah. No problem, Wendy or whatever, making something up.
Yeah.
Okay, super cool. But now in a month's time, you could follow up with Wendy or Susan or Jim or whoever from HR and say, hey, I just want to, see where you guys are today. Has anything changed? I have these new projects. Hey, take a look at this. I just did this freelance job, or I just did this project for fun. And I'm going to add it to my portfolio because I really think that it brings something else to light in with the way that I think about design or branding or product or whatever. Boom, boom, boom. And you can just continue to share that. And then, that person can continue to see that you're still interested, that you're super proactive and not just sitting on your hands all day.
Yeah.
And, or you can share out, these podcast, outcomes and say like, hey, I just spoke to this person. I thought they were pretty cool. Like, you might want to listen to what they have to say about, the current job market and job searching and this, that, and the other. I don't know.
Yeah. Yeah, that's true. I try to work on I work on passion projects quite a bit.
Yeah, cool. Excellent.
And so I try to share them on LinkedIn, but I don't seem to get much traction there. And I know it's all really just a game, right? But trying to create that visibility with
Mm-hmm.
and I sent out invites to connect with people in industries that I would love to be involved in. But yeah, I do find that a little difficult. So do you think it could be perceived as a little too pushy if I'm sending out like work to prospective employers or people that I want to work with, to be like, hey, like, here's what I've been working on. Just want to.
I don't think so. I mean, like I don't, unless you got, feedback to the contrary, I would
Yeah.
say no,
Okay.
because you just never know, how that can impact somebody's thinking. And until you get like negative impact, you say like, hey, dude, you're really bothering me. Like this is really bad. Don't send me anything ever again, blah, 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 blah. Then I say there's nothing that says that that's a bad thing.
Cool.
And I think that it shows to me, if I were getting that and I wasn't finding it, you weren't sending it to me every day, and I was getting it, every other month or whatever, like a new email from Chris, like, hey, Chris, I really love this project. Here's some things you might want to think about. We don't have anything opening right now, but I know that in the future we might. Please stay in touch because I see, potential for you here at just using my past job at IBM. Okay, super cool. Yeah, I definitely would do that.
Okay.
Again, the thing that I utilized at IBM was my ability to go to like portfolio days. Like I just went up at CSU. Like if I was working, that would be something that I would use to my advantage to, scope out new talent, you
Sure.
know? And it's so much easier for me as an employer to talk to people and get in touch, look at that and look at their work in a proper setting. And then I can also, this is what I did when I was at IBM. I would go to Texas State, like I said, and I would meet with the professors. And I was like, okay, we're going to be hiring in the next couple months. Put me in touch with your top like 5 people here. I can't talk to everybody. I would love to, but I need like your top 5 people. And the
Yeah.
woman would just go like, boop. She wouldn't even open her mouth. She would just like circle where these 5 people were. And then I'd go around and I'd get those resumes and cards, portfolios, whatever links. And those were the 5 people or 4 people, 3 people that we would, ultimately be interviewing, you
Sure.
know? So that's why I say, like, I think it's really helpful for prospective job searchers to get out there in the world and get yourself in front of as many people and talk to as many people as you can, because that to me is invaluable. while
Yeah.
i while I think it's great to like go on Indeed or go on company websites and look for jobs, there are like hundreds of people that are doing that, but there are less people that are actually going out to these conferences and talking to other people and like personally networking. Like I can't emphasize the importance of that personal connection.
Yeah, I agree 100%. And I'm not from the recruiting standpoint, but it's pretty obvious when I look at a job posting on LinkedIn, and this used to be kind of rare to me when I'd look at it 5 years ago, where you'd see it was posted an hour ago or 2 hours ago and you already got 100 applicants.
Right,
So
right, right,
I wonder
right.
how much of them are actually taking a look at all of these, and just kind of
Can't.
getting overwhelmed and overstimulated, right?
Right, right, right.
So
Again, I've never been on I've never been on the other side, like the HR side, or like
yeah.
that part of it. But they're using AI to kind of go through all of that information.
Yeah. And you
And
also get team leads posting on LinkedIn too and saying, inbox me, but I'm sure they're getting flooded.
right, right. And I have people all the time that email me via LinkedIn that say like,
Yeah.
hey, we have this job opportunity, blah blah blah. But by the time I look at it, like, to your point, 200 people have already applied, and I'm like, no, man, I'm not doing that.
Yeah. Yeah, right.
I
Yeah.
just don't, you know I just don't have the energy to kind of like fight that anymore.
Yeah.
um the couple of 2 3 interviews that I've done, like people reach out and they're very sincere and they email, like personal email me then I know that they're really serious about like
Yeah,
what they think I can bring to the table.
totally.
And then we're going to have a conversation via phone about what the job's about, how I might be able to contribute to it, et cetera, et cetera. And then, we can go from there. And I've had those, I've had several of those conversations, but they're, as I said, they're few and far between unless you're really kind of like on it every day. And as we talked about prior to like, the recording started, it's just not something that I do regularly.
Yeah,
I might apply to like, again, I think that since I've lived here in Colorado, I might have applied to like 4 or 5 jobs, you
yeah,
know, and then the other 4 or 5 conversations I've had have been with people who have reached out to me directly. And
yeah,
those are the ones that were much more productive or closer to coming to fruition, but there was
yeah,
always something there that like either I didn't feel good about or they didn't feel good about, and didn't come about. And like I said, seeing myself as semi-retired, I was like, that's cool with me, you know.
yeah,
And what I've been able to do is another thing that I would suggest for folks, and this is something I took up, at the beginning of this year, or actually the end of last year, 2024, was just like volunteering for organizations that I felt I
yeah,
could, my skill set, my knowledge, my thoughts, my ideas can help.
yeah,
And, I don't get paid, but like when I do the work, I feel good about it.
yeah, yeah. I've done that actually.
Yep. There you go.
It was there's a movement around here. I mean, it's nationwide, but changing spaces, advocating for creating adult-sized changing tables for people with disabilities in
Yep. There you go.
bathrooms and public spaces.
Yep. Perfect.
But yeah, I felt so good. I was helping with like social assets and things like that. So
Yeah.
yeah, but yeah, that's good to know. It also keeps you motivated. But yeah, like we talked about off camera too, is the whole like quality over quantity. And
Mm-hmm.
it's so easy to just become a number now in the corporate world. And maybe it's
Yes.
always been like that, but like,
Yeah. Yeah.
I'm newly introduced to that in the past like 5 years. So
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
but having the recruiters or whoever reach out to you personally, if they've done their research on you, and it goes both ways, then yeah, I could see how you would want to put your time into those as opposed to just any other job posting.
Right. The other thing I would think about too is like, we talked about this idea of proactivity. And I think that like job searching has always been about and benefited the proactive individual, meaning that you're interested in working for this firm. You need to like jump on it. You can't wait and hope that they keep looking at their website and hoping they're going to post a job because you have no idea like all of, let's say, the resumes and portfolios that they're already receiving minus any sort of job posting that they're putting. But then as soon as they post a job, more than likely they already have the person in their
Yeah,
system that
yeah,
they can pull from. Like they have like whole HR departments are doing this sort of work that I told you about that we were doing at IBM, that we would get like these portfolios and these resumes and these emails, and then I'd have to review these 20 things that we got last week and like put my yes, no, maybe and notes about like these particular designers. And then when we were ready to hire, like I said, we already had, you know, 20, 30 people that we can pull from without even having to like put out a job,
yeah.
notice.
Yeah. Yeah, that's good to consider, and especially for myself too.
Yeah,
I had sort of I don't know, well, I mean, I think you're familiar with the fact that I got laid off last year, right? And so, about a year and a half now. Yeah, last February. So it kind of like in a way, I sort of had like a not an existential crisis, but trying to figure out what I wanted to do, you know?
sure.
Um,
Yeah, yeah. And I
wanted
think you always do that.
yeah. Um, yeah, I don't know. It was kind of interesting, but there are strategies that we're talking about now too that I hadn't taken. Um, and it's I can't blame anybody but myself too for maybe not doing the proper research or anything. I was
Mm-hmm,
going
mm-hmm.
based off of and we could get to the AI stuff, but like seeing what I was utilizing ChatGPT to ask like what how should I tailor my resume now? you know?
Mhm.
And I also talked to a career advisor about this as well, but quantifying the impact that what I did at wherever, um, you know, just quantifying it, right?
Yeah,
Um,
yeah, yeah.
so yeah, anyway, that was,
Well, that's a good word that I hear and read about a lot when it comes to anything. People want to know what the impact that you had on X. You know what I
yeah,
mean? And that's what you want to be able to showcase. Whether it's in your resume or in your portfolio site or what have you, like in the introduction to that project that I'm going to look at, or maybe at the end or what have you, like you need to be able to, in today's world, you need to like, quantify like the results.
sure.
And while, there's a lot that goes into a design outcome that is not quantifiable, in my opinion,
Yeah,
um, there needs to be something that you can showcase. Maybe it's not with every project. Maybe we can kind of look at, you know, um, hits and likes and, feedback or sales numbers or whatever the case may be to quantify something.
sure.
Again, one of the things that that I told you about volunteering is like, I volunteered for the local like Trout Unlimited chapter. And prior to that, like their social media was like ridiculously bad. Like they had no views, they had no likes, they had no followership, nothing. And I
Yep.
was like, look, man, let me just do some things for you guys. And when events come up or this, that, and the other, let's just try to get more traction here. And we had the beginning of the year to put in like a goal, like what are your goals for the year for me as the communication director. Okay, here's my goals, blah, 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 put it in the spreadsheet. Well, I already, I surpassed my goals in like the first like 2 months,
Hmm.
because it wasn't hard because they were doing nothing. And so the fact that I
Yeah,
was doing something, like exponentially boosted our viewership and our membership and followers and something by like 200 to 300%. So I wasn't up against anything that was really difficult, but even so, I can quantify the impact that I've had in 6 months.
yeah,
And nobody
interesting.
cares about that because I'm not going to apply for a social media manager or anything like that. But that's just an example of saying like, okay, I can see where we were prior to me starting, this volunteership, and now I can see where we are now, and I can quantify that, our viewership and followership and whatever's increased 500 to 200% or whatever the case may be.
Yeah,
And so, like, if I was applying for a job, someone could say like, oh, damn, like that's decent, like that's a decent amount of increase of viewership.
yeah,
And if I'm putting more eyeballs on, our brand and our assets, our brand assets, then, that's what we want because that turns into sales somewhere along the line.
yeah, sure. Yeah, makes sense.
Yeah.
Um, on the topic of resumes and stuff, how
Yep.
important do you think it is to have just kind of like a, um, I guess it's the best way to describe or a simple way to describe it, but like a Word document, as a creative, a Word document of your resume,
Yep.
as opposed to something that is aesthetically pleasing.
Right. Um, it really depends on the the ask of the employer,
Okay.
because a lot of people want a Word document because it's easier to scan via like some computer generated
Yeah.
outcome, where if you send me a PDF, my internal software, AI cannot glean the sort of data points that I need, the
Yeah.
keywords. But in a Word document, a native Word document, they can do that. Because you can't send them like an InDesign document that just turns into a big mess. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
For most folks, but
Yeah.
most programs can handle something as simple as a Word document. So I think it's very important. But I would also say that it makes a good deal of sense to still, and again, I'm not a Word expert, so I would say that what I can do in Word as opposed to InDesign or Illustrator or something like that, is unmatched, because like I don't know Word for nothing except for just typing
Yeah.
some stuff out. Um, but I've seen people, do some pretty nice things in Word. You can still design it, you know.
Yeah. Right.
I have a level of hierarchy, bold, italic, regular types or what have you. Insert a logo type or something like that. So it's still, color could be a possibility, but simple stuff, just simple stuff to just maybe, you know, show that you care about every aspect of what you're going to put out there of
Yeah.
your brand that represents, you.
Yeah, totally. On the topic of Microsoft Office and everything like that, I was a little surprised when I entered the corporate world how often PowerPoint is used as a designer too.
Yep.
We
Yeah,
create
yeah. I mean,
elements, but
yeah.
a
We had
lot.
whole people, we had whole like, whole groups of people that designed just PowerPoint, just worked in
Yeah.
PowerPoint all day, every day.
Yep.
Because there's a lot of presentations that are made in, there's a lot of presentations that are made in, day out by managers of all
Yeah.
sorts,
Exactly.
and they want their presentation to look, again, especially at IBM, because there's a branded way that things need to look. And when I worked in the marketing department, we were absolutely responsible for it looking the IBM way.
Yeah.
And we would get stuff from people that was like, oh my God, what are you doing, man?
Yeah.
There's a template. You just pull it offline.
Yeah.
It's so simple. And it gives you like, again, I used it the other day. Again, I still use the template for IBM for my Trout Unlimited group to do their presentations. I mean, obviously I changed it for the Trout Unlimited colors and blah, blah, blah.
Sure.
But the grid's already there. Like it's so simple. And I can use like a free font. IBM's fonts are free. So I get a free Google font that if the president wants to change something, he can just download the same font that I'm using because it's free on Google.
Yeah. Yeah, totally.
It's a
Um,
beautiful font that they gave away for free.
that's pretty awesome.
Yeah.
Yeah. Um,
So, I
yeah.
mean, so the idea of like, learning and knowing how to use, Word properly is not a bad thing either to like to put in your resume because it's used everywhere and PowerPoint's used everywhere. Now, again,
Yeah.
I had people that, we put on, working in PowerPoint and they almost like their brains almost exploded. But,
Yeah.
when people did it right, I mean, it's
Yeah.
great.
That's how I felt the first time I heard that I was supposed to be using PowerPoint. They're like, all right, you're going to do a presentation template. And I was like, you've got to be kidding me. I was like, the last time I used PowerPoint, I think was maybe high school or something like that, you know?
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
Um,
but in the corporate world, I mean, like I said, I've only, had at that sort of level, my position at IBM, I mean, it was something that came across my desk like 2 and 3 and 4 times a week,
oh
easy.
yeah. Yep. I could totally see it. And then in a different environment, we started using Canva. Um,
Mm-hmm.
so that was a whole other topic and everything like that. But
Yep.
I won't get into that. But I do have my suspicions about it replacing me in my job, So
Right, right, right. And I would advocate, just to, you know, I would squash that like immediately because I've seen um that program. It's not anything that's going to be replacing human beings anytime soon. Um,
yeah.
it's only as good as the operator.
Yeah, 100%. And I think that there are people involved with making the decision to switch to Canva who don't understand the design side very
Mm-hmm,
well, right?
mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
And they assume that because it creates things that it is a designer. But I've said this before where I think it's just one of those things where it's gonna have to be a trial and error like thing for them where they see that it is going to impact their numbers and how
Yep.
their brand is being represented because it's just literally just copy and paste and cheap, you know?
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Um,
And I think that's the thing is like, the thing is going to be, it's going to impact
yeah.
their economics in terms of savings. But ultimately, what I've seen, by people that use it, pretty regularly, and like the other thing that I'm volunteering for is my gym. So,
Mhm.
um, you know, the owner, she uses Canva exclusively for all her social media posts and this, that, and the other, right? And she's like, oh, I use Canva. And I was like, yeah, I mean, but you're the operator and you don't know anything about design. Now, I haven't,
Right.
I would never say that to her, but, I said, like, you have to understand that, like, if I use Canva, it's different because of the simple fact, like, I know about hierarchy. I know about, you know, balance, symmetry, asymmetry, like all of the principles of design that I can put into the thing. So I've done things for her. She sent me things and then
Yeah.
I put it into Photoshop and I make it right. And then I send it back to her and she tries to replicate that. But
Yeah.
that's as close as we get to it being like right, you know?
Yeah. Yeah, totally. I saw this post the other day. So on YouTube, I'll follow sort of like side hustle pages and things like that. And I had this phase where I was like really curious about pressure washing businesses, you know. I
Sure.
definitely went down the rabbit hole after I lost my job. But
Sure.
and there's no shame in that. But
No, no.
they had reshared a video or a post that somebody else who's like a one of those side hustle gurus or whatever about an AI website that they built that will build websites for people. And so what they were advertising was stop spending like hundreds of dollars a month for agencies to build your website and blah blah blah. For $50 a month you can use this platform and it'll build a website for you and everything like that, you know. And had thousands of reactions to it and people like,
Mm,
yeah, like, oh, I don't want to waste my money. But it's like you're missing the point of the value that you're getting from having
yes.
creatives and the maintenance that they can provide as well, you know.
Right. Right.
$50
Right.
a month, and AI is not going to understand it either, you know.
Nope, nope. And I don't know how many like responses that you get now, but if any like customer service, um, let's say email that I get in the last couple of months, it states that this was AI generated. And even before I get to the end, I know that a human being didn't write that.
Yeah, yeah,
Or I know when a human being writes it and when, some computer replies to me because of, let's say, the lack of humanity and lack of empathy that the computer cannot generate, you
yeah,
know? Like
yeah,
it kind of it seems to, or what I've seen so far is it seems to, like, you know, walk around and talk around the problem that you are presenting it, but it never like solves it, you
yeah,
know?
yeah. That's a good way of describing it.
But yet, like when I get a human being reply, they're always, hey man, we're real sorry. We'll get that fixed. We'll actually send you out this new thing. We'll, or here's how you can, like they give you solutions to it rather than, like just a general, like, oh, hey, we get these all the time and here's what we're real sorry. And it's just so like jumbled thought. It's just really bad. And I usually reply, dear Mr. AI, I'm really happy that you replied to me, but you didn't solve my problem. So if you might pass this on to a real human being, I'd really appreciate it.
Yeah,
Thanks.
yeah,
Like I kind of like tongue in cheek, like how stupid this sounds, but like I want the people on the other end to know that I'm not real pleased that, you know, this computer is in the place of, they think it's taking the place. Now it has to go through two rounds of like wasting my time and now wasting someone else's time to read my reply of
yeah,
what the AI generated thing replied to me first. And I'm like, man, you just could have had like somebody read it and
yeah,
then send me a real reply and we could have got this thing done in one shot, you know?
yeah, exactly. And then AI is like, absolutely not, because that's my job security. So
Right, right, right,
even though
right
they're
on.
doing it for free.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Um, so do you think that it's okay to put, you know, on your resume that like you're familiar with AI and Canva and
Absolutely.
everything like
And
that?
if you are, I mean, I think that that's going to be a feather in your cap as opposed to other folks who have, you know, who have kind of shunned that and said like, this thing, it almost makes me feel like I'm going back to 1988, 89, 90 when, like the computer first came into the world of design. I had so many people we're like, this thing is never, who cares about this Apple thing? This Apple thing, is going to be a bust. Like, you know, like it's never going to take the place of a real designer that knows how to do these things by hand, blah, 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 blah. Well, I had a lot of people that I know of back then that did not take the time to embrace,
Yeah.
again, I was equally skeptical, but I was like, you know what? This thing is in its infancy and it's only going to get better and
Yeah.
more complex. And I got to learn this thing. And I took the time to learn how to manipulate at that point, like a real early version of an Apple computer. And next thing you know, like I was having, our senior people, which I really hated at the time, and probably, one of the reasons why I decided that that job was no longer good for me was, you have your senior people who refuse to like touch it,
Yeah.
and then they're coming to you and they're like, hey, like, I have my creative director, she'd ask me to like sit with so and so to like redo their hand drawn designs in the computer so that we can then send it off to get printed and then cut it out and then make the presentation in 2 days. Like, well, why doesn't so and so learn how to do it like I learned how
Yeah.
to do it? You know?
Yeah.
So it's making me think it's kind of like in the same realm. I don't think it will be, but I know that it's a thing, and it's an important thing, and companies are really try to exploit it in any way that they can. So I would say that, and I think even Brady talked about it today. We talked about one of my other former alum, um, and he talked about it in his IG post today.
Yeah. That
Like
was Brady Patterson.
embracing AI.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm definitely gonna have to check his stuff out.
Yeah, Brady's
Because it's
awesome.
it's definitely super divisive right now. It's like either you I wouldn't say love it, but like there are people who love it. But like, yeah, people hate it or, kind of curious about it. Maybe they just don't want to talk about it because they don't want to be attacked by the people that hate it, you know.
Right.
But
I don't think, it's anything that you need to like talk about. I don't think it's anything that you need to love or hate. I think it's neat, it's like a tool, you know? It's like, you saying, well, I don't really love Photoshop. Okay, I get it. You don't love Photoshop, but guess what? To be a working designer today, or illustrator or InDesign, or, pick a program, um, if you don't know what that is, you're at a disadvantage. If you don't
yeah,
know how to at least like marginally, manipulate it in a way that you can do some things, you're going to get, you're going to get outsourced, and someone else is going to take the job, is going to get the
yeah,
job.
yeah, totally. Yeah, it makes sense. There's
Yeah.
another outside of like AI, and also let me know how we're doing for time if you need to split too. I don't want to keep it too long.
Yeah. We got a couple more minutes. Let's do a couple minutes.
So outside of Adobe, there's another platform, and I forgot the name of it. Um, but I don't. I'll have to look it up.
Okay.
Um, Adobe alternative, but people are pretty upset with Affinity. It's called Affinity. I don't know
Hmm.
if you've heard of that.
No, I haven't.
So Affinity, they have programs very similar to like Illustrator, Photoshop, and everything, right? But there's been a whole thing about Adobe ripping people off. Like it's too expensive to have the monthly membership. I mean, I pay like $60 a month for like mine, so
Yeah.
it's not the
Yeah.
cheapest thing in the world. I use it
Yeah.
a
Yeah.
lot, but
Yeah.
Affinity, I don't know the prices on that, but based on what people are talking about, it's a lot cheaper. So I don't know. I guess I haven't heard of people using it in the workplace, but I just was curious if like you've heard anything about
I
it.
didn't even know it existed, to be honest with you. And I would, again, I don't really have the time or the energy to want to learn something wholly new again.
Yeah,
So, I'm going to stick with, the tried and true programs that have been around since, you know, the 80s.
sure. Yeah,
Like these people have put in the time and the effort, whether you agree, you disagree with the model, or where the where the tools are now or what it looks like on screen. Or, I mean, you could always like shoot holes in like everything, but until you sit down to like design it and back end it, then you got nothing to talk about
Yeah, that's
in
fair.
my eyes. You know what I mean? Like, I'm
Sure.
happy that someone else is doing all that work, so I can sit on my side of it and just like make some stuff with it.
Yeah, yeah, that's fair. That's fair.
Yeah, what I mean. So, you know, um, do I agree? I mean, since I started these volunteer things, I had to like up my subscription to like include like InDesign and Photoshop and
Yeah,
Illustrator and not much beyond that, because those are kind of like the three main programs that I use on the regular.
yeah.
But I went from like $19 to like $30 a month, and I'm like, well, I don't even make any money off this stuff, man. This is this
Yeah,
is
right.
this is killing me.
Yeah,
So that $30 a month is, kind of whatever. I put
yeah,
in my Good Samaritan contribution,
yeah.
but
Yeah, feel good about it.
yeah, yeah, exactly. So, but again, if someone comes up with something that's better, or if Adobe decides like they're not going to produce these things anymore, well, then we're all stuck to maybe jumping over to something new. But I'm going
Yeah,
to stick to what I know and what I grew up with. Believe me, like from the beginning.
yeah, fair enough. Yeah, they're definitely tried and true for sure.
Yeah.
But yeah, all right. Well, I think that's probably a good note to wrap it up on.
Okay.
Covered a lot of good stuff, and I appreciate you coming on here,
Yeah,
Joe.
man.
It's been great. You know, see where this goes, and if you ever want to hop back on, more than welcome to. I'd love to get multiple people on here at one time. But yeah, unless is there anything else that you wanted to add? Um,
No, I think the things that that we covered are, again, just maybe to wrap up, is one, like be true to yourself. Two, like never stop like learning and searching out, anything that you find is interesting. Three, like be proactive. I always said this in class too. When you're job searching, it's like dating. Like you're never going to get a job. You're never going to get a date if you like sit in your living room and wait for someone to knock on your front door, like Prince Charming or Princess Charming. It ain't happening.
yeah,
So you need to like get out there in the world and meet other human beings and commune and connect to those people. I know it's hard. It's something I have to force myself to do. But when I do get out there and I'm talking to folks, you never know like who you meet and like the sort of wants and needs that someone else might have as a business. And you're like, I could help you with that. Like that's how I got like this work with my gym, you
yeah,
know? Like I didn't like Chrissy doesn't have like a job opening for, you know, an all around design guy person, whatever. But, she had some new business cards like on one of the tables. And I was like, Christy, who made this for you? And she's like, oh, I hired this guy and he said that he knew about design and he's also doing some photography for me and blah, blah, blah.
he's a Canva artist.
I was like, Christy, this thing is garbage, man.
Yeah,
So next day I came home, popped open my laptop, sat down, took her card, inserted it. I didn't want to change the whole thing, but I was like, here's what this thing should look like.
yeah,
Center like 5 versions of the same thing here. You can have any one of these. You tell me which one you like. I'll make a PDF. I'll make a JPEG. I'll do whatever. I'll make 5 files, and then you can just use them whenever you want, like no charge. And she
yeah.
was like, oh,
And they can see it too.
oh yeah, yeah. She didn't know
Like,
why, but she
yeah,
was like, "Holy cow!" Like that. Oh my god! Like I
yeah,
made her cards and this, that, and the other, and then she said like, "Oh, I want to do like windows." Okay, so I made like doors, windows, and put her mark on the windows and the doors. Oh, I want to expand my business into um nutrition, personal training, blah, blah, blah. Okay, I'll make a new mark for you for each one. Next thing you know, she's like, okay, I need to compensate you. I said, yeah, you do, because I just gave you like $5,000 worth of work.
yeah, right. So
you
now you
know,
have
and it, you
lifetime
know,
free
it's
membership, right?
yeah, but it just like she's like, well, how about like, you know, I said I don't want you to pay me because you know you probably can't afford me, but you know, I come here 3 days a week. Why don't we just call it a wash? You know, like
Yeah.
so she's like, okay. So now like I look at my like what I owe her and it's like $0 like every month. I'm like, okay, super cool.
Yeah.
That's worth it to me. But you know, like again, that would have never came up if I didn't, you know, if I wasn't proactive about it and if I didn't feel like I could assist in some way.
Yeah, totally. And yeah, not be afraid to invest in yourself when it comes to going back to the networking and stuff like that, to go to the events, right? Like,
Yep.
yeah, in the end, it will, I'm sure it's worth it. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, again, and we talked about like, you know, education. Like education comes in a lot of different forms, you
Yeah.
know. It doesn't always have to be formal, meaning like, oh, I have to go back to school. Like we talked about graduate school, which I, you know, I would fully support.
Yeah.
But like I said, going to like a day long conference or a weekend long conference, man, you can get so much out of that, man. And the, like I said, the networking opportunities through the roof,
Yeah.
you
Yeah.
know?
Really.
And I mean,
I'm
like
going to look
school
into
does the
those
same
tonight.
thing, you know?
Yeah.
You know, school does the same thing. Like, you know, we talked about, you know, prior to this, before we started recording, was, you know, like, hey, you're in touch with, you know, some of your classmates and this, that, and the other. Like, the people that you meet along the way become like your extended network.
Yeah.
So when you're in trouble, you know, like job wise or others, you know, you got these folks you can lean on now and they can lean on you. Like when you're prospering, potentially some of those folks are down in dumps. Okay. Hey, man, like I just lost my job. Well, hey, I know so and so, so and so and so and so in this department, in my corporation or in my, you know, in my job, in my firm, we can use some help in that department, that department, that department. Okay, I'll
Yeah.
get you send me your resume, I'll get this in there. So that already tells that manager that if Chris gives me this resume, this is someone I need to look at.
Yeah, totally. That's how I've gotten jobs recently. That's how I
Yeah,
ended up with Spartan. You know, Dylan
right.
was like, "Hey, we have a spot opening up. Like, yeah,
Boom.
I can advocate for you." And yeah, it was huge at a time that I really needed it too. You know.
Right. And you know, whether that was the case or not, that's exactly the way you're going to find 90% of your position today.
Yeah, and I think it's common for, well, maybe not common, but there are a lot of designers out there who are intimidated by social situations. But like, what's the worst that happens? You know, when you talk to somebody, you
Yep.
got to try to put yourself out there, right, to establish those connections and network.
Yeah, it's not anything that I think any of us, you know, or a lot of us really, you know, thrive in. But, you know, everybody understands the awkwardness of trying to meet somebody new anyway. So, you know, there's this level of forgiveness, hopefully, and
Yeah,
empathy on both ends, you know,
yeah,
that you're approaching this person and you're being empathetic to their position of like, oh, here's this guy. Like, I don't know him from Adam, but he wants to talk to me. Okay, super cool. But you know, and then you and then them from the other side is like, okay, let me just, you know, hear this person out. Like, you know, who knows, like I could benefit from this. Maybe this guy's like a boy genius and you know, I'll benefit from in some particular way and I don't even know, you know.
yeah, totally, totally. Cool. Well,
All
thank
right,
you,
so that's
Joe.
how we should,
Yeah.
I think now we should end on that one.
Yeah, that was perfect. That was a
Nice,
great
man.
pleasure. Yeah, excellent nuggets of knowledge. I really appreciate you coming on here and providing these.
Yeah,
Like,
man, it was fun. It was
I
fun.
knew it would be great talking to you. So,
Good
yeah,
deal.
good luck with everything coming up.
Thank you. You too, sir.
Congratulations on the book publication or like, you know, being published and everything like that
Yeah,
too.
there it is.
Yeah,
There's
show
love.
it. CCC. Yeah, nice. Okay, so no matter if you flip this or whatever, we'll be able to read that. So,
Yeah, I guess. I mean,
um,
like I said, I didn't design anything and I didn't write anything,
yeah,
but yeah, I'm in there. There's a picture of me somewhere in there. Pictures,
yeah.
plural.
I'll
Yeah, I
definitely
can't
have to
find it
check
right
that.
away, but yeah, I'm
Cool.
in there. But yeah, when the guy reached out to me, I was like, "What? Who are you?" And he's like, "Oh yeah, remember?" And I was like, "Oh yes, yeah, yeah." No, I
Yeah, it's so
remember.
funny. I
I'll
mean,
send you a book when it comes out. I was like, "Okay, sounds cool, man. Thanks."
imagine how many more of these are gonna like surface, you know, because being a professor too, I mean, you meet so many people. So
Right, right,
yeah,
right.
but
That's
okay.
funny.
Well, anyway, thank you so much, Joe.
Thanks, Chris. Good
Here.
seeing you, man.
Good to
Good
see
luck
you
with
too.
everything. Have a
Thank you so
blast.
much. All right, take care.